Having discussed the different plant groups, Halophyta, Bryophyta, Pteridophyta, gymnosperms and angiosperms, if you observe the reproductive cycle in all of these plants, you find that there are two distinct stages in the life cycle of a plant. The two stages are, one is a haploid stage, that is your gametophyte. So this is the stage which contains half the number of chromosomes, and this stage, it produces the gametes. So the haploid gametophyte, it produces the gametes. These gametes then fuse and they produce the second stage, which is diploid. This is called as the sporophyte. The haploid gametophyte produces gametes through mitosis. The sporophyte then undergoes meiosis, producing the spores. Spores then germinate to produce the haploid gametophyte once again. So the life cycle of sexually reproducing plants, they alternate between the haploid gametophyte stage and the diploid sporophyte stage. This is what is called as alternation of generation. The gametophyte stage produces the gametes which undergo fertilization and produce the sporophyte. The sporophyte undergoes meiosis, producing the spores, which in turn germinate to produce the haploid gametophyte. Now there are certain variations seen in different groups of plants in the alternation of generations. The main theme being the alternation between the haploid gametophyte and the diploid sporophyte. There are three types of alternation of generations seen in the plant groups: haplontic, diplontic and haplo-diplontic. Let us understand them briefly. The haplontic life cycle is predominantly seen in Thallophyta or algae, that is in Volvox, Chlamydomonas, Spirogyra. There are exceptional cases though. Some algae, they undergo diplontic cycle and some exhibit haplo-diplontic cycle also. In general, most algae, they exhibit the haplontic life cycle. In the haplontic life cycle, the dominant phase is the gametophyte stage, which is haploid. That is why this phase is called as haplontic, because the dominant phase is a gametophyte. The main plant body which you see is a gametophyte. It is free living, it is independent and it is photosynthetic. It can prepare its own food. This gametophyte, of course, it produces the gametes through the process of gametogenesis. It could be isogamous, anisogamous or oogamous. The gametes fuse to produce a zygote. This is the diploid stage. This zygote then undergo meiosis to produce the spores the spores are haploid in nature. These spores fall down, germinate and produce the gametophyte. So in the entire life cycle of algae, the diploid zygote stage is seen for a very short period of time. Rest of the life cycle is dominated by the haploid stage. Hence, this cycle is called as haplontic. So, the gametophyte phase is dominant, which is haploid, whereas the sporophyte phase is shown only by the zygote. So, this is the sporophyte. In diplontic, it is exactly opposite. So, diplontic life cycle is seen in the tracheophytes. Tracheophytes are the vascular seed-bearing plants, that is the angiosperm and the gymnosperms. Both of them exhibit diplontic life cycle. Here, the main plant body is a sporophyte, which is independent, free-living and photosynthetic, and it is diploid. So the main plant body is a sporophyte. The sporophyte produces spores. These spores by meiosis. The spores give rise to a gametophyte. Gametophyte produces gametes. Gametes undergo fertilization to produce the zygote. This zygote is what will then grow into a sporophyte, and here the gametophyte could be a few celled to multicellular. It is dependent on the sporophyte. It is not free living, it is not independent, it is dependent on the sporophyte. This is the diplontic cycle. There is a intermediate form of life cycle, which is what is exhibited by the bryophytes and the pteridophytes. Haplo-diplontic life cycle is also shown by certain algae such as the ectocarpus, polycyphonia. These are algae which show haplo-diplontic stage. There is algae fucus which shows the diplontic cycle. So bryophytes and pteridophytes show the haplo-diplontic stage. In haplo-diplontic stage, both the gametophyte as well as the sporophyte are multicellular. Only thing is, the dominant phases are different. In the case of bryophyta, you know that the dominant stage is a gametophyte, which is haploid. The gametophyte will produce the gametes. These gametes then undergo fertilization, that is syngamy, and they produce the zygote, which is diploid. Zygote then produces a sporophyte, which is also diploid, and then the sporophyte will undergo meiosis and produce the spores. Spores germinate to produce the haploid gametophyte. So the haploid cycle and diploid cycle are almost equal in haplo-diplontic stage. In bryophytes, gametophyte phase is seen for a longer duration, therefore it is haplo-diplontic, whereas in pteridophytes, the dominant phase is the sporophyte and gametophyte phase is seen only for a short duration of time. So it's a intermediate phase, that is your haplo-diplontic cycle seen in bryophyta, pteridophyta, Ectocarpus, Polycyphernia and also certain kelps, algae. These are the three different forms of alternation of generation seen in plants: haplontic, diplontic and haplo-diplontic. That is the end of the lesson, Plant Kingdom. Thank you.